You know when you find a torn scrap of a story and you just absolutely have to know the rest? It's like a giant puzzle. Well, let's dive right into this explainer. Today, we're taking on a really fun, kind of dark challenge. We're going to do a forensic analysis of a fragmented script. We've got these scattered, almost torn excerpts from a screenplay called Obsession, written by Curry Barker. And just like a detective pinning evidence to a corkboard, we're going to piece together these clues, these little lines of dialogue and stage directions, to uncover what looks like a seriously tense psychological puzzle. Right off the bat, the title page is striking. We've got this bright, almost cheerful yellow font spelling out obsession, complete with a subtle little drop shadow. It instantly roots us in a very specific visual reality. You know, in script writing, the title page is literally your very first impression. Contrasting this upbeat, modern typography with a word that screams paranoia and fixation, that is a classic thriller technique. It gives us this super eerie undertone before we've even read page one. So we kick off our actual textual investigation with this provocative little fragment. It's a bad look. I mean, that is just such a loaded phrase, right? Those four words instantly establish a tense, super judgmental atmosphere that kind of just permeates these pages. It's a total masterclass in economy. Someone is watching, someone is judging, and social perception is clearly a highly weaponized tool in whatever crazy world these characters are living in. Okay, moving into section one, profile of Bear, the flawed protagonist. Let's build a psychological profile of our central character, Bear. Is he a suspect? A victim? Let's find out. This text right here brilliantly illustrates how a great script uses raw physical imagery to establish a character's mental state right from the jump. We aren't just told Bear is sad, we're shown that the couch is a poor man's wallpaper. He essentially just blends right into the furniture. Now, we've all had those lazy Sundays, sure, but for Bear, it's his permanent state of being. He slouches in a depressed existence. His actual physicality is mirroring his internal defeat before he even speaks a single word. So, compiling the text's explicit descriptions, we start to see a really specific archetype forming. Bear is a 25-year-old guy, and the script makes it a point to say he is decent-looking. So his defining trait isn't some outward physical flaw, it's a crippling internal lack of confidence. He is literally fading into the background of his own life. And guys, when you're dealing with a psychological thriller, a protagonist who completely lacks self-worth is highly vulnerable. They're basically a blank canvas for manipulation. Take a second to let that sink in. This is a guy who is practically begging to be influenced. Which brings us to section two, the erratic Nikki, catalyst of chaos. Because let's face it, every mystery needs someone to completely shake up the status quo. And in this script, that role absolutely belongs to the highly unpredictable Nikki. If we treat the script's stage directions as behavioral evidence, we get a crystal clear picture of Nikki's physical state. She slurs her words, she stares off into space, and her movements are totally abrupt. It paints a picture of someone deeply unwell, maybe sleep-deprived, or perhaps even under the influence. And it creates this incredibly stark contrast to Bear. Where Bear is passive and just melting into the couch, Nikki is jarring, erratic, and utterly impossible to ignore. But the really crucial point here is how the other characters perceive her. They definitely don't seem concerned for her well-being. No, they dismiss her, they slap her with this awful mocking nickname, Freaky Nikki, and they demean her creative work, telling someone to go read her dumb novel. We've all seen toxic environments where the outlier becomes the punchline, right? And here it shows a deep, deep lack of empathy from everyone around her. Nikki is isolated, ridiculed, and entirely alienated from her peers. By comparing these two fragments of dialogue, we can literally feel the narrative tension building. Over on one side, there's a reference to Nikki's unreliability or past drama. I don't know what Nikki has said in the past. But then we see the spotlight aggressively shift to Bear. So are we going to talk about you and Nikki? Bear and Nikki, the two outcasts, one passive, one erratic, are now inextricably linked in the eyes of their peers. The rumor mill is just churning, and the pressure is mounting on both of them big time. Section 3. Interpersonal office tension. Let's pull back for just a moment and map out how this toxic environment and the dynamics of the supporting cast are really fueling the central conflict. Compiling all these fragmented characters into a tightly wound ensemble shows us exactly what kind of workplace hierarchy Bear and Nikki are trapped in. You've got Carter, the 52-year-old boss, who also happens to be Sarah's dad. Hello, nepotism and complicated power dynamics. You have Ian, who casually excludes someone at the last minute because it was a guy's thing.
And then you have this incredibly aggressive, honestly bizarre toxic language from an unknown coworker calling someone a year-old shitbrick in keyboards. Yikes. Clearly, HR is asleep at the wheel here. This is not a safe environment. It is an absolute Shark Tank.
Now look at the contrast between the aggressive, prodding dialogue directed at Bear and his completely passive, defeated physical reactions. It's a relentless verbal assault, telling him to grow up, interrogating him about his connection to Nikki. And how does Bear respond? He stutters. Well, no, why? Followed by the stage direction. Frustrated, Bear bows his head. It just highlights his total inability to defend himself. He's absorbing all this toxicity without fighting back at all. And that tells us, as readers, that the internal pressure is building to a highly dangerous degree. Which brings us to Section 4, a dark climax. Eventually, that pressure has to release, right? Let's escalate into the dark, unresolved finale of the text we have, where this mundane, toxic office drama turns absolutely chilling. On silently, he does not want to wake her. Notice how starting the sentence mid-thought, in lowercase, immediately creates this feeling of being dropped right into the middle of a tense action. After all the loud, aggressive chatter of the office, this sudden quietness and secrecy imply a massive shift in stakes. We've moved from the public sphere into a private, intimate, and highly vulnerable space. Someone is creeping around in the dark. Empty. This single, stark word, totally isolated in the script, forces us to pause. In screenwriting, giving a single word its own line is a massive red flag for the reader. It's a pacing tool that demands your absolute attention. So we have to ask ourselves, what is empty? Is the room suddenly empty? Is a weapon empty? Or is this a description of a character's life? Or maybe even Bear's soul after finally snapping under the weight of it all? The ambiguity here is just terrifying. And following that emptiness, we get this sudden phrase, "I'm yours." Is this a romantic surrender? Or is it a chilling declaration of possession? Given the title Obsession, the erratic behavior we've seen from Nikki, and Bear's absolute zero self-confidence, this radically alters the dynamic we've been tracking. It feels a whole lot less like love and way more like a bear trap finally snapping shut. And we wrap up our explainer on this ultimate lingering thread. What did you do, Bear? It is a chilling drop-off that completely flips the script. Throughout our whole analysis, Bear has been the passive punching bag, the guy slouching on the couch, bowing his head. But this terrifying accusation transforms our passive protagonist into the prime subject of a horrifying mystery. It leaves us with one massive, provocative question. When a person with absolutely no self-confidence is pushed to the absolute edge by a toxic shark tank and a chaotic obsession, who really becomes the monster? Thanks for joining me on this explainer. I'll catch you next time.